is the most subjective yet objective form of expression. It's wrong of you to think that art only belongs to us, also only belongs to the people. It's somewhere in between. In the third year of college, things were really bad. I didn't know what was happening. Slowly, it got into a very dark space, and that's the only period when I stopped drawing. I didn't have anyone who actually influenced me to go towards art or any of that. It just came for the need to fit in. Anime has always been there in my life. Even now I'm wearing like a Madara Uchiha t-shirt. The first feeling as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, like was a sense of loss, something that you hold so closely and it just goes away one day. That was the first time when I felt like a crippling feeling of losing something. You don't know how many times I get messages from my other artist friends. Bro, they are using your artwork for reference. They want me to make something like yours. I'm like, why don't you just call me, hire me? Or like, nope, they won't do that.
Welcome to Take a Pause with me, Varun Duggirala.
So, as I was preparing for this episode, I read a bunch of stuff. I watched this TEDx that you gave, and a couple of things almost like hit me. Some of them will come at some point of time in this conversation, but I want to start off by saying, I think one of the first things you spoke about is where you grew up and almost where that kind of started off your process of finding art as a language. Do you want to talk about that point when you first discovered art?
Yeah. So, like as a child, my first introduction to art was through comic books, because and pencil boxes. There are two parts of that. First, I think the earliest introduction would be through pencil boxes, because I used to collect those Dragon Ball Z pencil boxes, which had that holographic thing on the side. And see, by then I had already watched a bunch of cartoons like Spider-Man and all that used to come on TV. But this Dragon Ball Z was completely different. Like the way because it was an anime, the whole visual language, the style, the eyes, the hair, it was so bizarre. It was a whole different world. And I had no idea what it is. And it was easy to draw. So I started replicating and copying those Dragon Ball Z characters. I used to sketch them out. And I think that's the earliest memory of me actually drawing something and being fascinated by the whole world of anime before even knowing what an anime was. And I used to collect a lot of those boxes. And they were some of them are fakes. Because I never knew which one was fake, was original. Like, I don't know if it's from Japan, it's from, I don't know, China. And also we were closer to like the Chinese border and Bangladesh, and also we used to get a lot of counterfeit products. And Dragon Ball Z being one of the biggest counterfeit product to ever come in to the States. So I think that's the earliest memory of me drawing or sketching.
I've had a lot of friends from the Northeast area. When I was in school, I had a bunch of classmates, and one of the things I also always do is there's a certain cultural vibe that is so rich in terms of just the kind of things you gravitate towards. I like some of the best music I've heard and got introduced to came from a bunch of friends from I had a couple of friends from Mizoram, a couple of friends from Nagaland. They kind of like introduced me to bands which I didn't know. And I remember them talking about the fact that it's such a cultural thing that you have so many people around you who you meet, who introduce you to things and who make you discover everything from music to art, everything else. You also spoke about finding your own tribe of misfits. During that period, did you find more people who were interested in the same things, or was it more like you learned it from others? What was that period like?
That period was, I didn't have any idea about art, and where I'm from, there's like very less exposure to art and design. And art is always considered as a summertime hobby thing.
Yeah.
And even though I had a knack for it, like I would draw, color, and my teachers were also like, okay, you kind of good at this, maybe you should take up art classes. But unfortunately, I was not put into one. So I didn't have anyone who actually influenced me to go towards art or any of that. But it just came on its own, I would say, just for the need to replicate or maybe boredom or just to fit in. And the real influence for me would be music, because like where I'm from, if you throw a stone, it'll probably land on a metalhead or a metal band or a rock band. And so most of my friends were musicians, and unfortunately I can't play any instrument, nor can I
You
sing.
tried?
I did try. I had an acoustic bass guitar. I used to just fiddle around with the bass because I like the bass guitar, but then I was never that good at it. And I still can't remember chords and stuff. I'm very bad in that. So I think, but what happened is I was surrounded by so many musicians and people who were into metal music and even hip hop. There was also a big group of people or kids who were into hip hop. Either it's hip hop or metal music, because like the neighboring state like Meghalaya, Shillong, and all, hip hop was also quite big back there. So a lot of the kids were into hip hop and heavy metal. So I picked up the sense of music, and with the sense of music came the album artworks. And you know how graphic heavy metal album artworks are. Like at that time, I was listening to Cannibal Corpse, Decapitated, and Dayseed, and all those Dimmu Borgir, and all those bands, and they had like really graphic album covers, and which really spoke to me because like you also have to understand the socio-economic status of that place. When I was growing up, it was really bad. Like there was a lot of insurgencies happening. There's a lot of like bomb blasts, and like it was very chaotic. And we're also under a lot of CRPF, like army base. How to put it? There was a whole ASFA Act, I think, just Armed Forces Act, which was put upon the disturbed areas. So, and Guwahati and Assam was one of those areas. So it was straight up under sort of like an authoritarian rule of the CRPF and the army. And then you have a huge population of kids who don't have any outlet. There were no malls, there were no cafes, there were no any sort of engagement to engage all this new teenagers. So naturally, we got into a lot of vandalism, a lot of heavy metal, a lot of punk music, a lot of rage against the machine, basically.
yeah.
So that's why we always gravitated towards like heavy metal or punk or music like that. And then for me, I wanted to be part of the tribe or be part of the whole scene. And I had realized that I had this sort of talent of drawing, because I was always drawing, copying Dragon Ball Z and all those characters. So I got into making album covers and album artworks for the local bands. And I would do it for like few beers or maybe entry into the concerts and just to hang around. And I think that thing caught on, and that thing became a voice for like all of us. Like through music, through metal, we kind of spoke what we always wanted to speak about. Like there's a lot of the local bands used to talk about the violence that we were facing. We used to talk about all the atrocities that were faced by the tribal communities back home. So there was always a message to it. Apart from the cover songs, everyone covered like Cannibal Corpse, Iron Maiden and all, but the original numbers had always, the original compositions had always spoken up about the violence that we as northeastern states used to face back in the day.
Yeah. I feel that's one aspect we sometimes forget, right? Is that and you talk to someone who's saying they're an artist, you're like, "Oh, fair enough, you're inspired by something from within you and you just go and create." But it's often other art inspires art as well, right? So it could be music, it could be something you've read, it could be something that is happening in the world around you. So, and I've always been fascinated by lyrics, because I feel that sometimes you will listen to certain music and say, I can't understand it, but if you actually read the lyrics, you will see that there's a lot more depth than you realize, but you somehow feel it, even though you might not. Because when I think of like a lot of metal music, I think of even like some forms of rap, you don't necessarily catch the lines unless you actually read them, or you're just sitting down and trying to like learn them.
Correct.
But I find that what you're saying is also is important, is that the environment you're in pushes you towards forms of art that are almost a reflection of how you want to kind of, I mean, either you're pushing back towards it or you're you have something to say about it.
Yes.
Is that why you feel that your style kind of evolved in the direction it did, because it originated from that?
Angst.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like yes, and I'm very proud of it. Like, because see, for me this has always resonated, like this kind of illustrations, like being very graphic in nature, or something that is very disturbing. It was very soothing for me to look something very disturbing. And at a very early age, I got exposed to a lot of violence and nudity and stuff like that, because I was kind of left unsupervised most of the time. And unfortunately or fortunately, I ended up buying a lot of like adult comic books and stuff like that, from mostly from those second-hand stores who used to sell hand-me-down books. And also I used to just go there because I didn't have enough money to buy like expensive books. So I just buy them in bulk. And they would sell it in kg.
Yeah.
Right. So I would go there and I'll get like 1-2 sacks or kgs of books, and then I'll like look through them for like comic book covers. So I think that really that whole angst, that whole vibe of like screw the system, like nobody gets me, that thing is still alive in me, but I do it in a much more smarter way now. And that is sort of like a source of inspiration for everything that I do. Like before, it was really graphic, like straight up, I'll draw a lot of artworks which are inspired of Cannibal Corpse album artworks, which are very graphic. For example, there'll be like mutilation, like a lot of mutilation, a lot of like body parts, and a lot of disturbing stuff. And I used to like draw exactly those things. And like you said about the whole thing, like sometimes you resonate with the feeling of the song, and when you read the lyrics, like it's a whole different image that forms in your head. But without understanding the lyrics also, you get the essence of it.
Yeah.
And when you said that different forms of art and medium inspires other forms of art, and I think the core, which I believe in, is the essence. Like for every artist, be it a musician or a writer or a visual artist, is the essence which survives. And I think and as an observer, you'll only resonate with the essence. The contours, the forms, the figures, these are very physical and superficial layers to an art piece. But it's the essence which really matters the most when you're creating something. Like even though I'll be making like a flower or something, or painting a flower, I started with a series called Portraits from Childhood Trauma. So I'm trying to teach myself how to paint again. Because all these years, like, I don't know, 20 years or how many ever years I've been doing art, I've only been relying on the skill of sketching more than painting. So I wanted to experiment and further push my boundaries by relearning how to paint. And I rarely use colors. So now I've started this whole exercise. I'm like, how do I teach myself to paint again? Then I thought to myself, how did I teach myself to draw?
Yeah.
By copying those characters, right, which I used to draw as a kid. So why don't I paint them as an adult? So I started painting those same portraits that I used to draw as a kid. Like my first portrait was Goku from Dragon Ball Z.
Of course.
But I changed it up because I'm not the same person.
Yeah.
I don't have the same amount of innocence in me. So I am doing like a twisted version and sort of those feelings that were associated with those portraits. For example, with Goku, it was the sense of loss which I had because I was a very big collector of those pencil boxes, and most of them got broken or people stole them from me. So there was the first feeling as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, I forgot, like a sense of loss, something that you hold so closely and you're collecting and it just goes away one day. That was the first time when I felt like a crippling feeling of losing something. So like that, then there was the second portrait I did was of Naruto, because then anime has always been there in my life. Even now I'm wearing like a Madara Uchiha t-shirt. So then a third, I did a Batman, again in different styles of mixing gore and having my essence intact, and then revisiting my whole childhood phase which I had. In that process, trying to teach myself a new skill.
I want to ask you about when you're saying you're teaching yourself a new skill, and people always have this notion that you were kind of born with the ability to do art or you're not. But I've actually realized, and this is more recent, because I was always, so I learned art the way, and this is my standard line, and I stopped saying it, is that we all learned how to draw that house and those two hills and that stream and that coconut palm tree.
Yeah.
But it took me years to kind of sit down and say, one second, maybe I just want to try doing it just because I want to do it, not because someone will see it and judge it. Because I feel most people kind of stop themselves because they're worried that maybe I don't know how to do it, maybe people will judge me about what I come up with. And it's been actually the last 3-4 years for me, and mainly because of having a kid who also is interested in it, is that just start to scribble some stuff myself, start to draw some stuff on the iPad, for instance, or work with paint with her. And I realized that it might not be art to anybody else, but for me it's almost a form of release, but it's also a form of me finding some form of expression and finding my own style. You talk about finding almost the ABCs and later figuring the sentences of your own visual style. Do you think there's for someone who's struggling with where do I start, where does someone start?
So there are two, I would say there are a bunch of ways to go about it. I think most of the people that I know and most of the self-taught artists that I know, they've all started by copying. Like we were all copycat artists in our initial days, because we'll always like teach ourselves how to draw by looking at other art pieces or paint the paintings, because I mean then you have a reference point. You're not just starting from scratch, and you there's less pressure. The problem, like you said, like there's a bunch of pressure associated with creating something new, because it is a risk. A, you're spending your time, B, your effort, and then C, you might get judged on what you're doing, right? And that might not be very beneficial if it's not in your favor. But I honestly think copying other art pieces does help you out initially when you're starting out and you don't have a particular style. So experimenting and practicing and just learning from other artists does help. And B is you should always do it for yourself. Like it should be something that I enjoy doing. Like suppose I like certain kind of jokes, I like certain kind of like TV shows or like reading certain kind of content, right? But that is very personal. Like art is the most subjective yet objective form of expression that ever exists. So it's wrong of you to simply or us to think that okay, art only belongs to us, and B also art also only belongs to the people. It's somewhere in between. So for me, I feel like initial when you're first starting off, you should always do art for the sake of art. There's nothing else. The moment you start making it a profession and you start making art for a living, that's when you have to consider a bunch of other things. But when you're starting off, you don't have anything to lose. Like, I mean, you shouldn't stop yourself from doing something. And who else is going to judge you? It's just you. It's a piece of paper. You can just burn it also.
Yeah. And you judge yourself the most, if you think about it, right? Because
You know what I do? Once I finish a drawing or a painting, even before, I forget about it. I completely forget about it. I might revisit that artwork or that sketch or drawing maybe after years. Okay, what next? I don't sit back and see and like, oh, this is nice. Oh, I messed up there. This is wrong. I never do that. I don't critique myself in that process. And so what I do, I just finish a painting, I finish a drawing, take it off, put it inside, and gone. It's out of my head. What next now? And I think that really helps me because it just keeps me on my toes and just helps me be prolific with my art form.
yeah, because if you actually sit on it, and I agree with you, and I think in a very different sense. So, for instance, when I do this podcast, and the people behind the camera will tell you this, is that after the episode's recorded, I don't want to look at it. So I'm like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to. I trust people to be able to put it together, and we largely don't edit too much out anyway. There was a point of time when, because I didn't want to edit it, I literally used to just start, stop, upload. Because I agree with you, it takes away judgment.
Yeah.
It takes away, because I think self-judgment is far higher than what people will judge you. you will sit and think about, okay, this is, what if someone notices this, or someone says, maybe I can do this better, should I just scrap this? It's just that you're done, you put it out there, and then forget about it. Is almost the best way, because it also shows that you enjoy the process
Yeah, correct.
more than the result.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it is always this whole. I mean, it's a cliche thing. You should always like enjoy the process, and like, but that really works.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing this, like, as I'm getting older, a lot of those cliches actually hold good.
Oh, yeah, they do.
I mean, as a teenager, as a kid, I was like, yo, it's so cliche shit. I mean, like, this is not even meta. Like, why the hell are we talking about this? But then now I've realized a lot of those cliche things comes from experience, and it does make sense. And like, and I completely agree with you on this. Like, it just the process does matter. It is quite important.
And then to go on a total tangent, you then, from finding that initial ABCs and sentence formation, like you said, you then went to do engineering,
Yeah.
which can be a podcast series of artists and writers who have met in this city and across the board, who've taken a lot of inspiration from their years in engineering, not in the best way, to really find a way to express themselves. Because there is something to that. If you are not someone who's into it in the way, I'm guessing people who are really into the science of it, if you're doing it, it can actually feel like you're almost being boxed in, and you have no option but to find a way to escape.
Yeah.
Is that the visual you would think of as well?
Yeah, correct. I would like that. It is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Like, you're boxed in, because for me, I there was a misconception. I had a very big misconception, because I really like science.
Same here.
I love science, but it's a big mistake. I thought engineering and science, they are the same thing, but they're not. They're completely different.
I used to love to code. I used to love, as a kid, I would sit and code when I had nothing to do, my free time. But then
C++.
C++.
I still remember
Even
those.
basic C++. I'm that old. Basic C and then C++. I did all of those, back in the day.
C++ was like more advanced. Like, advanced as in, like, it has a blinking cursor, I think. It was nice. We also were taught coding and all, but I never got it. Like, first it started with flowcharts, then got into coding. But I mean, I was never in. I like mostly the hardware side of it.
Yeah.
Because I think when I was in 6th, 7th standard, I've already started like changing my graphic card, my RAM, buying my own stuff, assembling CPUs and stuff. I was really into that because I loved video games and gaming. And every time there's a new game, I would change my graphic card. I save up money, sell drawings and all, save up some money, buy a graphic card, and just fix it myself.
Yeah.
And then I also took up a course during a summertime. Other kids would go for like swimming, sports, tennis, and all. I took up a course on how to fix computers, like hardware stuff.
Yeah.
So it was really nice. Like, I was really into hardware and all.
And that's what, when you said that you liked science, it's that I think all of us as kids grow up being fascinated by science.
Yeah, correct.
And sometimes you kind of go into a formal form of education in it, and then you just like run away from it instantly.
Correct.
So what happened once you got into engineering?
I got in, and first year was difficult. See, I was in two colleges. First, I was in SRM, Chennai. I mean, and that was the first time actually I was out of Guwahati and on my own. And I met a bunch of other people from like Assam and Northeast. So we were like a huge bunch of like metalhead kids in Chennai with long hair and like always wearing black clothes, getting into fights and stuff like that. So we kind of had a reputation. But then it was a bit difficult for me because I didn't realize that I mean, I was in the wrong department. B, it didn't make sense. I didn't understand whatever was being taught. And now recently I've discovered that I'm actually a little bit dyslexic also. So for me, language is a big barrier because there's few words and stuff. And my handwriting keeps changing weirdly. Every time I write, it changes. It's a completely different handwriting every time I take up the pen. So I slowly figured out, okay, I am, and it makes sense now because whatever was being taught, I didn't understand.
I think a lot of people, I think, still don't understand. Thankfully, now it's a lot better, but people still don't understand what being dyslexic is. And I have traces because I have friends who've also discovered. Some of them, thankfully, parents figured it out very early, but a lot of them just figured out much later in life.
I mean, our parents never knew there's a thing called dyslexia. I mean, I don't never knew. Then recently, I'm like, okay, you might be. I can because there are a lot of signs, a lot of symptoms of it. I'm like, okay, cool.
Your
Another
your
artist
your,
having
your
dyslexia.
P's become flipped. You can't figure out the difference between a 6 and a 9.
Yeah, I can't figure out left and right.
Yeah.
That's like my biggest thing is I like, okay, do I have to tell him now it's left or do I have to go right?
Yeah.
Like I have to do a whole calculation in my head. Okay, this is the right side.
Yeah, one of my friends, one of my closest friends is dyslexic, and he was the first person who actually learned it from. And this is like I was in postgrad, I didn't even know it was a thing. It's the fact that he would, whenever he wanted to turn, he said, "Okay, which hand do I eat with? I eat with this hand. Okay, this is right."
Yeah,
So
I
he
do
does that. He does the eating thing.
Yeah. I do that. I do the same thing. Okay, this is for eating. This is for washing.
And that's how you know left and right. And when he did that first, I'm like, why you keep lifting your hand when you're turning your vehicle? And he's like, because I have to figure out what's left and what's right. And
Correct. I so relate with that.
yeah. And there's so many of these aspects, right? Is that, and the reason I'm digging into all this is that there are so many things which lead us to becoming who we become. And all of those are in those years when you still like, you have no idea where you're going with this.
Correct.
And then he went to the second college, and at some point.
So first year went in SRM, and also secondly, unfortunately, like apart from being in a new city, new place, there's a lot of like racism also involved because especially being from Northeast and there was like a lot of racism from some of the professors were really racist. Like I'll be really honest. But then the local friends of my age who I met, they were amazing. The problem was with the older generation who were the professors and teachers who used to have a very stereotypical mindset regarding people from Northeast. First of all, from the whole northern belt, but then again, if you're from the Northeast, you get extra dose of racism. So it was a bit difficult because then you just feel like, okay, we've already been through so much shit. And we're finally in a new city. We're trying to study a course which doesn't make sense. And they're already treating you like shit, but they treat you extra shit because you're from a different part of the country. So you just naturally sort of give up.
Yeah.
I'm like, you got discouraged from attending your classes or being enthusiastic about a subject. You're like, screw you. You're not going to tell me what to do. My whole life, we have been told what to do by other people. Now I'm not going to listen to you. So there's again the same thing happened. A sense of rebellion started again. And then I'm like, no, screw this. I'm not going to be part of this. Then things were not making sense. And it was hot. It was bloody very, very hot. Straight up, it was very hot. I couldn't bear the heat. But then I ended up failing in most of my subject. But that is when I actually started drawing again. I started like sketching, drawing, and during my exams, I would just sit and sketch on my question paper, my answer sheets, and sometimes the teachers would actually like my drawings and they'll just take it home. I'm like, okay, I'll keep the drawing. Anyways, you're not writing any answers, so you have to submit the drawing and then you can leave. Like, cool. So that was kind of like a weird appreciation that I got from from an unusual place.
Yeah.
And that was kind of good. And also my friends used to like tell me, oh, you're so good, this is really cool, you should draw more. So in my hostel walls and my doors, I used to like draw stuff, sketch stuff on my desk. There'll be a lot of drawings and a lot of font, like a lot of like those bands, those logos I used to draw. And by the time when I was leaving SRM, a friend of mine who was really a local friend from Chennai, we were really good. He's like, I won this desk. It was like those flip desks.
Yeah.
So we broke that desk and he took the entire tabletop with him and he kept it. I hope he still has it. But yeah, so and I slowly just discontinued staying there. I felt really sick actually in Chennai. I ended up with jaundice and it was kind of terminal. Like I was in the hospital for like 2-3 weeks. It was really bad. So after that, I'm like, no, this is not happening for me. I think I'll wanna go back home now. I don't like it here. And I went back, and like a fool, I made the decision to take up mechanical engineering.
So you had to continue it. Or you start from scratch again.
Yes, I have to start from scratch again. So 1 year wasted again from first year, where they teach you all of engineering, basically all the subjects. Like you know it, right?
Year one is common. Yeah,
it's common here. So you have to study all the like electronic, computer science, mechanical. You have to do all of that. Then I ended up in a different college back home. Then I thought maybe I thought if there's a change of environment, and maybe if I'm home, I can focus more on my studies. Because again, I was wrong.
But was there any point at this, even then, that you thought that maybe there's something I can do with art? Because art was still a release, right? Art was not a profession.
Yeah.
But was that ever thought?
It was actually, I think when I left SRM, when I left Chennai, I did have this discussion. And I did tell my folks that I actually want to take up animation because that was the only commercial education or something that would actually lend you with a job. And that's the only idea I had about art was through animation. So I told them I want to take up animation. I want to learn animation. I want to get into art. Anything to do with art, I'll do. But unfortunately, I was not allowed. I'm like, you've already wasted so much money. And art is like a dead-end job. Animator, you're gonna fail. There's no money in it. Like, and also we come from a very humble home. So there was always a pressure because I'm the oldest son. So there's also sort of a pressure that you have to succeed.
Yeah.
You have to do good. You have to make money, basically. But then I was not allowed to take up any of animation, any other course. It was my mom who would like give me money to buy art supplies. And I bought my first pen tablet. My mom only bought it for me.
Yeah.
And I think secretly, I kept drawing all throughout. Like I didn't give that up at all. I always kept drawing, sketching, because I was again in a situation where nobody understood me. And I was trying to break away from this cycle of failing. And nothing was like going good for me. And during that point where actually I really got into depression, because I was diagnosed with depression, I think in the third year of college, because things were really bad and I didn't know what was happening. And slowly it got into a very dark space and I had to be like, I had to go see a doctor. And then I was under medication after that for the longest time. And that's the only period when I stopped drawing. Because when I was on medication, I literally felt nothing. Like it completely numbs you out. Like you don't feel anything. You don't feel like doing anything. I ended up feeling like a machine. And so there was no outlet of expression. There was no drawing. There was no sketching, no art. But then later I got off medication. It was for a few years that I was on. I think I was on Prozac back then. And then I left everything. Then engineering was still going on. And basically that's the whole dark phase.
And then there was that specific point when art suddenly became something that you could...
Yeah. So during this whole time, I used to make art. I used to draw, sketch. I sit in the last bench and draw. And like we had this discussion. Like my college was like a school. Once you enter, you can't go out. And you have to sit for all the classes.
It's actually a question. A lot of engineering colleges have this, right? You had this, once you enter, you can't leave.
Yeah.
Mine had, once you enter, you have to either be in a building, but you can't stand outside in campus, right? You had to go inside some space. You either go outside, go inside cafeteria, go inside the classroom, but you can't stand around campus. There'd be guards who come and tell you to go, which I never understood.
Yeah, same. I don't get the logic behind it. Like, why?
They just didn't want it to seem like there was no
no one there.
No randomness happening.
Are they trying to show that there are no students in the college?
All are in the classrooms is what I guess what they want to show. Everybody's studying is what. So most of us would take the option of, if you're not in the classroom, you'd be outside.
Yeah.
And that's where I made some of my best friends, and and all of that. But sorry, you were saying about what happened when, but how you were boxed in, but where the art actually became viable as a profession for you.
I think, by this time I was already sketching, drawing a lot. I mean, that's the only thing that I was good at. So even during, I was forced to study also. Before my exam, my parents would be like, your exams are starting, you have to study, you can't go out of the house. So I lock my door and for 5, 6 hours I'll only draw. Then again, I'll go to my class, go for my class, go to college, and for whatever time I was there, 8, 9 hours, I'll only draw. So in a day, I would like out of 24 hours, I think 18 hours to 16 hours, I'll only be drawing, and nothing else I'll be doing. And then at that time, I started like forming my own compositions, because till that point I was sort of copying a lot of album artworks and other stuff. But at this time, I can't carry my comic books to the classroom. I don't have my computer or anything to just look at something and draw. So I started this drawing out of memory. I started sketching and drawing from things that I'm experiencing or I'm observing. I started making weird caricatures of my fluid mechanics teacher and stuff like that. I'll mix whatever stuff they were teaching, I would sketch them out in weird, bizarre, surreal sketches. So that's how I got into drawing and sketching, like making my own compositions. And then I was quite popular with my friends because most of my friends were musicians, and all the album artworks, I used to do it for free or for a few $100. So I think that's my first professional gig that I've ever had, was making artworks for all my friends and customizing their gears, their equipments and stuff. And then slowly, by fourth year of engineering, my final year, by this time I had already had like huge piles of back papers.
Yeah.
My mark sheets were like stacked up like this much. And I was carrying subjects from first sem till eighth sem. So it was impossible for me to finish my course. So, and I was still like, I was just hopeless basically. And then a friend of mine tagged me in a post. It was that RedBull World Doodle Art Championship. My friend tells me, like, I've only seen you doodle, like sketch and draw the back of your notebooks your whole life. I think this is something that is meant for you. Then I thought, I mean, I'll just give it a shot and see how it goes. So fortunately, like I took part, then I won the national, then I went for the international in South Africa, then I won the international too. And after being crowned as a world champion, then only I could actually make a change my profession
Yeah.
and the direction basically. And then like finally everyone believed that, okay, I can do something good in this field of work. So all this while, and sometimes I have this regret, if I went to an art school, if I went for a design, I went to a design school, if I was drawing from a very early age, if I was encouraged, maybe I would have developed a whole different set of skills, or I might be more skilled. I don't know. But for me to come to this stage at a very late stage in my life, when you've almost finished your engineering, and then you're discovering a whole new world of art, I mean, and then you have to prove to the entire community and your people and people that are close to you that, see, the world believes in me, so maybe you can also.
Yeah.
So that's a whole little dicey situation I was in. But then I got my first contract with RedBull International. I started designing for them merches and stuff like that. I think that's the first ever project or paycheck that I got.
I feel one of the things that holds people back is also this, right? Is that you actually don't know what you can do to earn if you are pursuing art. Obviously, it could be like I'll end up working for a company and designing for them, or it could be, the fact that I'll find ways to make. I think design is still somewhat understood, but when someone says there's visual art, even for parents, and I sometimes think about it, right, is that for the longest time for me, when I said I would want to work in the media space, the question was, what would you do? And my parents were actually open to me trying anything. They said that, but first tell us what it is, and then we'll take a call. I feel it's that. I know today there's a lot more understanding, but I still don't think there's enough understanding of what options someone might be able to have. And
Have understood.
and that's also holds someone back, right? It's like,
Yeah.
one second, what do I even tell my parents about?
Yeah, how do I convince them? Like,
Because they'll say, okay, is this going to make you enough money to survive? And then you're like, no, it can get me X, Y, and Z jobs.
yeah,
In all other standard, like engineering, you know what job you're going to get.
yeah, correct.
Or like even people knew, like, there used to be the standard thing, right? You do science. If you can't get into science, you go to commerce. If you can't do commerce, then you go to arts.
Arts, yeah, correct.
It used to be the thing, but I get why, because everybody knew what jobs science and commerce would give. I think even today, a large number of people don't know what you can do to earn a living if you do art.
Art, correct. And it's hard. I won't say that it's a very safe profession. It's not. I mean, first of all, it's a creative line of work. You have to be creative enough to find ways to make money out of it too. So it's not like, okay, I'm going to be an artist and people will come and buy my art. I'll be in galleries and not. That's the whole thing. Like right now, there's a whole general mindset. I mean, for you to be an artist or for you to be a really impactful artist, you need to have a lot of pain, a lot of baggage, a lot of struggle, and then you need to be poor, you need to be struggling, you need to be starving. Then only your art has some sort of value and all that stuff. And that is still going on, and the mindset is still there. That whole jhola leke nikalne wala artist, which like with slippers and all that shit. But that's the misconception. That stereotype has been etched into our generations, like our older generation, that if you're an artist, you'll end up
Like
being
that.
homeless, like
Yeah.
that. And that's the thing. That's what I try to do. I have always tried to break that stereotype. Like I'm not a very humble artist, to simply put.
Yeah.
Like I have my own personal indulgence, things that I indulge in. Like I like buying sneakers, I like being in good places, I like going on good vacations, and all of that I'm doing by making a living or earning through art.
Yeah.
People don't glorify the lifestyle of an artist. They'll always glorify lifestyle of a musician or an actor or a cricketer.
Yeah.
But there's no one there who actually glorifies a lifestyle or shows the other side of being a successful artist. And obviously, if that awareness is not there, your parents will not understand. They will not know, okay, you need to set an example. And that's what I'm trying to do with all the stuff that I'm doing, like being on podcast, talking about it with you, so that people understand that this is a viable, right now, at today's day and age, design and art is a viable medium of earning a good living. Even though design schools are quite expensive, to be honest, but there are a lot of other avenues, a lot of other schools which are doing amazing work, like JJ's and all. Even though it's a struggling thing, but it's very rewarding towards the end. And also, you shouldn't have this misconception or be carried away just because you're in art school that you'll be a big artist or something. You have to be equally creative at marketing and branding your art and yourself. Just because you can draw, you're skilled at painting and drawing, doesn't mean that your product will sell on its own.
Yeah.
It's you have to understand the business of it. You have to think like a brand,
Yeah.
and then only it makes sense for you to take up this line of work.
And there's also that one hurdle that comes, right? Is that, and I think this goes across all creative fields. At some point, I think you said this earlier. You initially just creating it for yourself. At some point, if you wanted to earn for you, you're not doing it just for yourself. You're doing it for other people as well. So what that actually means is you got to be more collaborative.
Correct.
You shouldn't say, no, this is mine. I'm holding it to myself. Nobody can touch it.
Yeah.
Someone can't give me feedback. Let's say you're working for a brand and doing something for them. If they give feedback, you shouldn't be like, I don't want to work with brands. They give me feedback. But you've chosen to do that. You've chosen to collaborate. And that actually, you never know, that could help you evolve as an artist. If it's only about you, at some point you'll hit a roadblock.
Correct.
How do you look at collaborating? I know you collaborate with other artists, with brands, everything else. Do you have a process of almost like do's and don'ts? And
There are a few do's and don'ts. And again, this area of client and designers and graphic designers and visual artists, this is also a very gray area. And all the new rules and regulations and the whole contract system has only been introduced very recently. for even now, most of the people, most of the freelancers, they work without contracts.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of free sourcing sites where you can get contracts for free, download templates and do it. But most of the artists are not doing, because like we as artists, we kind of believe in sort of goodness
Yeah.
in our clients. We feel like, okay, that person appreciates a little bit, because we don't get appreciated that much. So if there's a little bit of appreciation from any client or any a person who commissions it, you feel like, oh, this person really likes my art piece, or maybe I should do more, and I trust him or her or them. But that's a mistake, because it's a business end of the day. And what happens right now is, people work without advances, without contracts, and they end up in a very sticky situation, and the relationship becomes bad because you have not clearly like chalked down your do's and don'ts. And I have bunch of those do's and don'ts. For example, if I'm working on a collaboration, before, when like way before all of this collaboration has all happened, I used to work for a bunch of brands. And back then, I didn't have a brand name, Santanu Hazarika. So I used to be like a freelance graphic designer or someone you just hire. So then the struggle was real, because the kind of feedbacks you get can be very hurtful. And then, but you have to work around it. That's the.
You also sometimes get that it's not working, but nobody tells you what's not working.
Yeah, no, it's not working. I don't like the color. Can you make it more vibrant? I'm like, but you show me something else as mood board, and then you give me feedback which is completely different, and then you have to circle back to something that you have made in the first part after 10 iterations. It always happens. But then I've learned that you need that thing to be there, because end of the day, if you are someone who's providing a service, this client servicing is very important when you're working with any client. It's how you deal with that. It's very important, because that will assure you, like the client will come back again and again for the projects as freelancers, basically. So for many years, I used to work for the brands and stuff, and a lot of feedbacks, that whole dreaded changes email was there. But then simultaneously, I was also working on my personal projects, building up my brand name, doing collaborations just with artists and musicians, because I started off working with musicians. So then from metal, I went to hip hop, and I started working with other artists like Raftaar, Divine, Badsha and all. So they came in way later. When by that time I had already established sort of a name in the art world, in the design world, okay. And then because of that, I had weightage. And now the brands approach me for my particular style, because I had been putting out my style so much that people use my artwork as presentations and references in their pitches. So naturally, it was like they would come to me for that particular artwork. You don't know how many times I get messages from my other artist friends who are working in like agencies and all. Bro, they are using your artwork for reference, and they're using this as for the presentation. They want me to make something like yours. I'm like, why don't you just call me, hire me? Or like, nope, they won't do that. Yeah. So, I mean, that really works. Like till the point where you are known for your certain style of work, and you have a sort of a brand name, you have to be grinding and listening to the do's and don'ts, or maybe the feedbacks, and you have to do it in such a way that you are respectful, and you have to do it. There's no other way around it. And then slowly, when you have a leverage over the design language, see, if you want to collaborate, then it has to be on my terms. And right now, I'm in that position where I collaborate on my own terms. Yeah. But still, if I'm collaborating, I have a contract, I have a management in between for clear communication. And also, there are few basic stuff, very basic stuff. Even if you're starting off as an artist or graphic designer, visual artist, remember to take advance. Second, always number that charge per change. A lot of artists don't do that. Yeah. They're like, okay, I'll do changes. But make sure that after 1 or 2 rounds of changes, every change is going to cost you. Yeah. And that way, clients are also very more careful and more specific about what they exactly want. Otherwise, it can be very vague.
It's almost like, I remember, I think there's a hesitancy in general for someone who's creative to say, this is how much, why should I keep saying charging? I suddenly become this commercial person, and this is whole worry of being a sellout and all that stuff, right? Is that I remember someone telling me that if you don't value your time, nobody's going to value it for you.
Correct.
And if you're not saying you're making me do X work and this is the amount of money you give me for it, then that's you putting a value to it. And I will, at some point, you know your value you have. Sometimes you put a value to it. But if you're like, I'll do something because I don't want to have that discussion, then you're not valuing your own talent and your own time.
Yeah, correct. I mean, you rather be doing something else or working on your own skills and doing something else, I mean, and also nothing is there for free.
Yeah.
I mean, that person who's actually hiring you, that agency, that person who's directly in contact, he or she is getting their due payment and the salary, right? Why should you miss out on your payments because you still have to make, they are spending their time, they're getting paid for it. You're spending your time, but you're not getting paid for it. How is it fair?
You also said one thing about the fact that everybody believes that if you have to be an artist, it has to come from this point of angst and and I feel a lot of art starts from that. I think most people find it as a way to kind of express what they're feeling. But do you feel that there are other avenues people can tap into where someone might just be in a very good space in life, but they still will be able to express themselves?
Yeah,
And
I feel like it's very much possible. See, it doesn't matter. Like I said, it's the essence of the art.
yeah.
If you're able to capture what you're trying to convey, your essence as a person, doesn't matter if you're a sad soul, doesn't matter if you're like a full gung-ho person, like a full happy person.
Yeah.
But then if you're able to take that essence that you have in you and put it out on a medium, and the observer and people around it can tap into that essence, that is a good piece of art. I mean, like a lot of abstract. Like, what is art? Like, again, if we are to talk about this, we have to define what is art, and we don't want to go there because there's no way to particularly define what is art exactly. So for me, it's very basic. I feel like if the essence of the artist is being reproduced and reciprocated in a very honest and very straightforward way, in a very simple way, that is just induces that essence and that feeling in the observer, I think there you have a good artist. There you have a good art piece. And doesn't matter if it's coming from a point of pain, sorrow, happiness, or whatever. These are just human emotions. These are just senses playing games with your mind, right? And what you create out of that is completely up to you. I can be like a very, very depressed person and I can still make flowers. Like, for example, there's one artist I really love and I look up to. His name is Takashi Murakami.
Yeah.
He is considered to be Japan's Andy Warhol. He is like a full, like an otaku, like an anime guy. He dresses up in like weird flower costumes, octopus heads, and like very like kawaii person, like an anime character. But when I have few of his books, and when I go through some of his art pieces, there's always a sense of darkness and macabre, like feeling and essence to it, no matter how colorful. He did bunch of Kanye stuff also. So he's like a pop culture icon, and I really look up to him as an artist. He's an old guy.
Yeah.
He's been doing this since ages. Like, he's really old. He's like a grandmaster artist. But he paints all this. You must have seen that rainbow color flower smiley.
Yeah.
That's his logo. That's his design. It's called the Murakami flower. It's very popular. It's everywhere, right? So that's the kind of stuff he does. But at the same time, it's very dark. There's something very weird about it. If you look at his paintings, all the stuff, there'll be like characters, it's very sexual, mixed with a lot of dark theme, like essence is very dark and sexual, but it's packaged and painted in a very happy, commercial, lively package. So again, that's a very good example because that person is replicating his essence in a very smart and in a very different way, which is very commercial. But the essence can be felt by people who really appreciate his art form, right? So that's a perfect balance. That's a very good example of like it doesn't matter where your art is coming from. If you're true and your essence is honest, it works.
I can keep going on in this conversation, but I have a rule with all guests that we talk for an hour. I leave enough for me to get the guest back and hopefully do a part two at some point of time.
Nice.
So I just want to close off by asking you one piece, which is that because you said that you're almost working towards a new form right now, right? You almost started to paint now. Is there something you wished you had learned when you started,
Yeah.
which you know now?
I wish I had like bunch of other skills. For me, I'm not envious of the lack of vision or lack of creativity or ideas. For me, I'm little envious of the lack of skills when it comes to other mediums. For me, I really want to do everything. And I had taught myself, see, it took me 20 years to be almost 10 years of being in this line of work, and almost 20 plus years of doing the same thing, drawing and sketching again and again and again to reach this point. So sometimes I feel like if I had the resources or exposure to maybe sculptures or sculpting, animating, maybe making installations, making shoes, clothes, I think I would be very happy. But I'm also learning those things right now. But then when you're older, it becomes hard because you have to do a bunch of other stuff. You have to like live, pay your bills. You don't have the same energy as a teenager or as a kid to actually, or the activeness or the presence of mind to actually take up, like learn a new skill set. But I'm trying slowly to learn up more skills and increase my skill set basically. Because I really want to like not limit myself with the feeling of having lack of skills basically.
Thanks so much for doing this, man. This has been fascinating to talk to you. It's made me think about so many things. Also because I have a 6-year-old who I think her happiest time is when she has paint.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And it makes me just kind of think about while you were talking, I'm also kind of thinking about all of that stuff. And today morning before we came here, I was actually watching something she drew in her first art class of school we just started. And I was trying to decipher what she'd drawn. I was going to talk to her about it today. But you gave me a lot to think about as well. But thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, this was a very nice conversation.
Yeah.